الجدية نحو نظم طاقة حديثة متعددة المسارات. اسمحوا لي أن أدعو مدير الجلسة الدكتور أحمد الملا، مدير إدارة العلوم والتكنولوجيا في مركز أبحاث الطاقة والبناء بمعهد الكويت للأبحاث العلمية، فليتفضل مشكورا.
شكرا جزيلا على التقديم. Just a quick correction. The translation of the session in Arabic was not correct. The session is energy productivity as a new policy for sustainable energy transition. So this is a very important topic nowadays worldwide. So just an energy productivity as a new policy can be used by government to integrate a range of energy policy and development issues. We will be discussing today two important reports, one from King Abdullah Petroleum and Research Center, as well as another report by UN ASQA, which really concluded by the end that progress in sustainable energy can no longer be seen as a separate from other socio-economic development goals in the Arab region, but rather as a primary condition for sustainable powering their progress. At this moment, I would like to invite Ms. Radia Saddawi and Dr. Nicholas Howard. There will be two short presentations by Dr. Radia and Ms. Radia and Dr. Nicholas. We will start with Ms. Radia. Ms. Radia is currently the Chief Energy Section Head at the Sustainable Development Policies Division at ASQA. She has taken this post since February 2016. Previously, she was the head of statistics and gas modeling department at Sonatrach company, and as well as Algerian Association for Renewable Energies, and she was also a member in the Algerian Gas Association.
Thank you very much. Actually, we made our effort to have copies in Arabic version of the report, but the objective, yes, to disseminate the report where it was developed for the first time within the framework of the global tracking framework with the World Bank, international organizations, and it was disseminated through expert group meetings. At the same time, it was as well disseminated in Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Bangkok global conferences that help us to see how we put the Arab region within the context of the global picture. And also, if you see from the cover page, we try to see from where we started, where we are today, and where we are moving. The report as well, it's intended to also to give certain insight and policy orientations and key messages that we have taken from it in order to report them to the high-level political forum in New York this year. So basically, the main information that we need to take them as, I would say, quantified indicators based on the SDG 7 related to the energy. When we talk about energy access, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. Today, We do have close universal electricity access when it comes to the cities, but we still have 80% in the Arab countries who do not have access to electricity. This mainly in a rural area. 36 million people in the Arab region do not have access to electricity, and 8% are using clean fossil technologies, including LPG. But more importantly, less than 40% are in the Arab least developed countries, including Yemen, Mauritania, and Sudan. The energy consumption in the Arab countries have more than doubled over the last 2 decades, and mainly the focus in the residential sector, but more importantly in the industry and the transportation. I will give much more details later on. But renewable energy, including hydropower, represents 4%. Excluding it, it's just 1%. Let's see the global picture. These figures were presented where we look at the target. As you can see, we try to make it schematic, where you see the SDG 1.1, the access to electrification, I would say, where the percentage we want to achieve 100% today. The Arab region, it's 90.4 compared to the objective of 91% by 2030 made by the International Energy Agency. However, we can see that we did progress. But what we can say about access? Are we having reliable access, which is not the case, obviously. At the same time, if you look at the clean fuel technologies, and this, it's around 88% above the global average at 72%. We have done so well. But if we go to the disaggregation, now we see that the least developed countries are much more, I would say, having issues in terms of access. The other element as well that we need to look at the access that has been heavily impacted by the conflicting situation within the region. And we see, for example, in the Mashriq, like Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, and more importantly also if we look at Yemen and Libya. So all of this impacting what we call universal energy access. We say universal, we achieved above the 90%, but huge progress needs to be made in terms of quality. Now, in terms of renewable energy, when globally it's an objective of 36%, and today it's around 21%, the Arab region, and this is across all the countries, is the lowest in terms of the share of renewable energy in the final energy mix. What was highlighted this morning that this is the lowest, but there are projects coming on over the coming years, and we will see, for example, Morocco, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Egypt are doing tremendous effort, but still the decentralized system are not as much, I would say, a focus when it needs the private sector involvement, and it needs, obviously, much more investment. The energy efficiency, the key element when it comes to sustainable energy, we are, in terms of the global average, the lowest in terms of the performance. When globally we see improvements at -2.6, the Arab region is the only one, especially if we talk about the GCC, that we are here today. In the Gulf region, it's the most intensive because of the style of life that we adopted. Let me first focus a little bit on the energy access. Just to tell you that in other countries, and let's say in the corner of the Arab region, we do have kids that do not have access to electricity to study, and they do that. And this is a real picture from one of the Arab countries in Africa, where you see that how the difficulties the kids have in order to do their homework. This is happening in Sudan. We have an issue in Yemen and also in Mauritania. But Morocco also do have, despite the effort done in terms of rural electrification in the rural area, they need tremendous effort in terms of decentralized system if they want to improve the quality of life of the people. Another aspect, I try to show here some pictures in terms of looking which business model and I would say which economies we developed over the last 2 decades. You see that our industries, if it exists, it's mostly focusing on the oil and gas industry. We have petrochemical industry and refining, but we're still not gaining too much from the value chain of what we can have from our resources. Number 2, we developed very nice housing, but very energy intensive. So we don't know how sustainable it is. The same in terms of transportation now in different parts of the Arab countries, whether we do have crowded cities and at the same time lack of infrastructure, or we do have a lack of also of infrastructure in terms of public transport. If we move also to the GCC, we do have intensive, I would say, use of four-wheel drives that doesn't give incentive also in terms of energy efficiency. So this all, it shows that we do have an issue of in terms of management of our natural resources, and we need to do much more effort in terms of looking the way we consume the unit of energy. The major challenges that we face in terms of renewable energy efficiency are basically common in terms of cost barriers. We had a session in terms of technology. I tried a little bit to address the aspect of technology access and how the cost of renewable energy went down over the last few years. But this, despite the decrease of cost, you cannot, I would say, improve the access, I would say, the investment in renewable energy if we still have the same energy prices, and also not only energy prices for oil and gas product, but also for water, given that water within the Arab countries is also based on energy. The other aspect also, it's based on the market design, fully monopolized system. If it exists, the private sector is limited. And we do have also the political will in terms of looking what are the priorities that we put in place to put integrated policies that give enough incentives to move further in terms of energy efficiency and renewable energy. So all in all, if you put it in the dimension of, we call it the energy security within the Arab region, independently of the endowment of natural resources, but we all share the dependence on fossil fuels, and we all share the socio-economic dimension where it's need much more working on the fields in terms of energy security as an argument for social development. The other aspect also for energy efficiency, similar element in terms of limitation and motivation to invest in energy efficiency due to the existing energy prices, but also the infrastructure availability. You find it in the transportation sector, the industry that needs much more working on the different aspects of the process and the equipment. And also we do have the issue of local economies, which is today, as I indicated, energy-intensive industrialization based only mainly on the oil and gas and certain other industries that Nicholas will try to address when he addresses the energy productivity. And it shows which elements that we need to consider if we talk about energy productivity. The market design, still, we do not have the real competitive market, and we do have as well issue of regulations that still the deficit doesn't allow to integrate all the elements to create the market environment that enable to move forward in terms of energy efficiency. And for this, you see that in terms of one of the means of implementation, which is the financial instrument, not necessarily fitted if you want to talk about energy efficiency specifically by sector. Obviously, the other element, if we want to give the right picture, the lack of information doesn't allow us to go further in terms of going to much more details. But one of the elements also that give a good sign in order to show the positive picture of the progress in the Arab region. This morning there was a talk on saying that there was certain reforms in North Africa and certain Mashriq countries. But we forgot that since 2014, and we had the decline in oil prices, the GCC countries are the one who did much more of the reforms, and we see it's across all the GCC countries. What we do have, it's not only in terms of looking to the petroleum product, it's also for natural gas, for electricity, and also for water to the final consumer. And we see that this, if maintained, would really help to support and enforce the policies intended to increase the share of renewable energy, but more importantly, towards economic diversification and improvement of the economy of the countries. Talking about the Arab countries, if it's not a question of the SDG 7 focus on the energy, it's the first time that we take a report looking to energy really as the enabling factor for all sustainable development goals, but more importantly, looking to the Arab countries different completely than the other regions where you have less than 5% in terms of emissions, mostly located in the oil and gas producing countries, as we see some of the GCC countries in North Africa like Algeria and Libya, but the others as less than 1%. But overall, we don't contribute as much in terms of population, just less than 5% globally. But this growing population is much more increasing. We see that the MENA region will have the highest rate in terms of population growth. And this leads us to the issue of water scarcity within the region. We cannot talk about energy efficiency or renewable energy or energy access within the Arab region without talking about the issue of water scarcity. The Arab region and across all the Arab countries are the most scarce countries globally. They represent, if we take the top 33 most scarce countries in the world, 13 are from the Arab region, starting from Bahrain and finishing by Tunisia. And this makes a huge pressure in terms of the energy need, make a huge pressure in terms also bringing all this element of development and ensure the sustainability, and more importantly, if we keep the current energy pricing and water pricing, and how this would fit to the other element of the industries, so how we can develop the industries that could be much more competitive. But we do have two important elements that we need to consider, and they are, I would say, a given independently if we are talking about the Arab countries, the Mashriq or the North Africa or the GCC. We all exhibit different energy consumption, but we all rely on fossil fuels, and today more than 40% in terms of oil reserves are located in the Arab region, and third of it is natural gas. So basically, this is just the proven reserves. It means that we still have a potential that we need to use for the best, I would say, management of our natural resources, provided that is used in the productive sector. Again, we do have also untapped resources and potential in terms of renewable energy, and mainly solar and wind, which shows that these technologies, if well, I would say, that the policies are much more, I would say, fitted to the context of the Arab countries, would help to create jobs, yes, but more importantly, would help to use the oil and gas resources to gain much more in the added value that we can have from the best use through the industry that we can create. So given that the challenges that I talked about, I'd like also to add the issue of food security, but I would like also to add the issue of access to finance and technology. That I believe there were sessions that tried to address this element, and this is a critical issue when it comes to the negotiation in terms of climate change within the region that presents itself in terms of adaptation rather than mitigation. We do have also instability within the region. The geopolitical environment is a key element that you need to consider when you talk about our sustainable development. And given that we had also a session talking about job creation yesterday with the sustainable energy and the interlinkages, it's the region which has the highest rate in terms of young generation. And yesterday we had a presentation like the figures given by my colleague from Kapsar, talking about really the percentage of young generation under 25 years old in Saudi, and that they will be graduated, which kind of job they will find. So whatever we do as policies, whatever which we are trying to do today, we need to look at a long-term dimension, but more importantly, looking how we improve the quality of life for the young generation without leaving anyone behind. Only inclusive approach that take into consideration food security, water scarcity, energy security and climate change, and more importantly, human development, that is the approach that needs to be developed and used in an interlinked way in order to help and support the policymakers that are designing the policies today in order to put in place the dimension for not only 2030, but over the coming decades. And for this, yes, policymakers are key, but without the engagement of all stakeholders, this would not be possible. And that's why one of the priority actions that we submitted as the outcome of the Arab Forum that was conducted last month, end of April, when we discussed what are the priorities in terms of action within the Arab countries. Yes, we did development. We have certain positive actions that are in place, but we need to do much more progress if we are talking about 2030 and beyond, if we are talking also about a business model where no one is left behind and where the quality of life is improved, and where the natural resources is much better managed. And for this, We need to develop and implement and enforce real, suitable, and integrated policies, and real proactive policies, where the private sector have its role, the technology also is well designed when you design policies, and more importantly, the element, the socioeconomic dimension is considered. The other element is coherence also when you design policies between water energy institutions. We need really coordination given the context of the region, which suffer in terms of water scarcity. Building the institutional capacity, we really still need to build the institutional capacities at all levels of the institutions, government institutions, and to build also a monitoring system that allow us to manage and look at how we are, I would say, moving and progressing, and how we can correct our strategies. So the data collection system is a key, but we need three other important elements: is strengthen local governance and communication, within the same institution and between the institution, and to increase and expand the research and innovation across the different sectors, whether we have the access to a technology or not, but we need really to reinforce and involve the research institutions in all the activities that we are undertaking, in particular if we are talking about energy efficiency and renewable energy. We need, if we want to really talk about integrated market and learn from the best practices, is to enhance the interregional Arab cooperation and trade, and really remove and look at what we are putting in place as a regulation, which is binding somehow certain countries, but more importantly, it's not to protect your local context, but more importantly, how you can gain value from the collaboration. And we cannot talk about the market of electricity within the Arab region if we don't improve the collaboration. We need much more involved in the private sector, and we need also, when designing the policies, to involve the civil society, to have the stakeholder engagement, and gender equality should be key if you talk about job creation, if you talk about the way to improve the access to electricity, and the way we want to develop our business model in a holistic approach. The other element, extremely important, how we look at and exploit our natural resources in the best way, and also to look at the alternatives. Yes, renewable energy is alternative, energy efficiency is a key, and that's why if we want also to create jobs, then it cannot be without looking to the local content and develop local manufacturing, and also clean technologies in all its aspects. And in order to introduce the most important element that is applicable perfectly in the context of Kuwait and perfectly in the context of oil and gas producing countries, that to rationalize the use of natural resources and really boost the energy productivity through a combination of portfolio solutions. Among them, and the key is energy efficiency, combined with a social dimension, and how to create much more revenues through going completely through the whole value chain. And this cannot be without the element of implementation, for which we want to negotiate with those, the donors, who can support the Arab countries and those who need finance, to promote the investment in clean technologies, create the real financial market within our local market, and also develop and reinforce the technology dissemination and transfer, and reinforce the capacity building at all levels of the institutions, whether at the technical level or at the policy level, and also develop, when it doesn't exist, and reinforce the existing energy data system indicators and the collection system. These are the elements of implementation that we want to put, I would say, focus on it in order to negotiate with those who can support, and also with the policymakers, in order to give the key elements and key messages to move forward towards sustainable development, and not necessarily the future sustainable energy future. And with this, these are the chapters that we try to consider through our report. And you have the link to the website in Arabic and English version, and I'll be happy to answer to any details of question. And I guess my colleague Nicholas will follow up on the energy productivity aspect. Thank you very much.
I would like to invite Dr. Nicholas Howard now to the stage. Dr. Nicholas has more than 10 years experience in applied energy issues. He's now a member of CAPSAC, a team focusing intersection of policy and technology. And previously, he used to be an economic advisor to the Australian Economic Minister and a fellowship at the University of Oxford. So the stage is yours, Dr. Nicholas.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Not that long ago, an economist named William Nordhaus wanted to challenge the way we think about progress and energy. But how do you measure this across time, especially long periods? The yardstick he chose was light. This is a 12-watt compact fluorescent light bulb made in Germany, which I borrowed from the hotel earlier. Think of the light that it emits for 1 hour. Now imagine how hard you would have to work at various points in human history to pay for a similar amount of light of 1 hour. If you were an ancient Babylonian official, a little further north, you would probably be using a sesame seed oil lamp, and you'd need to work for about 40 hours to pay for that much light. If you were a French revolutionary, you'd have candles or perhaps a flaming torch, which would cost you around 5 hours. If you were a late Victorian, you might have Edison's carbon lamp costing you 45 minutes. If you turn on this light today, it costs you less than a fraction of a second. You can have, for less than a fraction of a second of what you earn at work, the light for which your Babylonian cousins would have had to work for a week. Now, if we were content to get by in Babylonian darkness, we wouldn't have a problem, except for the fact that we would be living like that, subject to many of the problems of starvation, disease, and boredom. And that, indeed, was what life was like for the overwhelming bulk of human history in the time between sesame oil and modern energy. Step back 200 years, and for most people, life was difficult and short. But crack clean, cheap energy, and you improve people's lives more than any other technological advance in history. For example, if we go back 100 years, oil was the hero of global development, enabling modern transportation services, and a whole range of economic and social progress was unlocked. Energy drives progress, but progress delivers more energy. Our aim is to supply people with the energy to make their lives better, but we also need to reduce the burden that this goal is imposing on the planet. It follows from this that we need a big goal in energy productivity that builds on these historical advances that civilization has made in the past. This is the topic that we're looking at in a paradigm way in the presentation that I'll be delivering today on energy productivity as a new paradigm for sustainable energy transitions. What I will be talking about today is three things. First of all, we'll go into a bit more detail around what is this concept of energy productivity and how it can be applied in a modern policy setting. We will run through very briefly some of the key insights of a report which was recently published in partnership with ESQA on this topic for Saudi Arabia and how energy productivity can be applied in that context. And then finally, I'll put up a selection of questions that arose from this research, which it might be useful to discuss with those of us here. So, what is energy productivity? Over the last probably 10 years, it's a buzzword or a way of framing energy policy that's increasingly being used in a range of contexts. McKinsey's Global Institute has done work on this. The US government set a target to double energy productivity in the US by 2030. Australia has a target to increase energy productivity by 40% by 2030. A lot of the world's major corporations have set energy productivity targets through work done through EP100 and the Climate Group. It's a goal that's been endorsed by the Sustainable Energy for All framework, and also alliances are popping up all over the world around this idea, from Africa to Australia and elsewhere. What we have done is pulled together a body of work drawing on a number of workshop series that we held in Saudi Arabia and around the world, and the production of several reports on the macroeconomics of how energy efficiency can benefit Saudi Arabia, through to sectoral studies on energy efficiency in industry, transport, and buildings, as well as work on economic diversification. We've pulled these pieces of work together into a synthesis report, which was really focused on one key question, which is how can the Kingdom's energy policy best support Saudi Vision 2030 goals? And one way to go about that is to increase the value society gets from energy consumption. Now, this is an overarching goal, and we'll get into some of the detail behind what that means now. So, energy productivity, it's a very common energy metric, which I'm sure you're all aware of. It's most often calculated as its inverse, which is energy intensity, but it has two key components: the energy efficiency in the different sectors of the economy, and the degree of economic diversification, the share of energy-intensive industry over higher value-added activities. A broader idea of what energy productivity is has also been suggested, which integrates also environmental benefits and social benefits to this equation. Now, drilling down into some of the detail here, we can see that energy productivity functions at different levels. At the macro level, which I've just highlighted, energy productivity or intensity are equivalent concepts that capture energy efficiency and diversification in the economy. At the corporate level, or microeconomic level, what we look at is energy use and output, which is the typical focus of energy efficiency, which is the amount of energy required to produce a ton of steel or cement, which you'll all be familiar with. But energy productivity extends this concept by also including the amount of revenue which is created per unit of energy consumption at the corporate level. And this is critical for Gulf countries in the sense that in their effort to diversify down the value chain, we aren't just looking at the production. You can be very efficient in the production, say, of ethylene, but what you do then with those further downstream uses, you can derive a lot more revenue through a variety of other activities. So we just don't want to be efficient at what we do. We also want to be producing in the areas of high demand with high revenue, which deliver prosperity. And this is a critical difference between the energy productivity concept and just looking narrowly at energy efficiency. So getting back to the macroeconomic level, and if we can see that a transition has been playing out over recent years in Saudi Arabia, which is broadly consistent with what we see also in other Gulf countries. After a period of heavy industrial expansion in energy-intensive industries, which drove up the energy intensity of the economy by around 4% per year, we've moved now into a phase of a more rational slower energy consumption and faster economic growth. And so we can see that we're at the start of a transitional phase where energy intensity or productivity seems to have turned a corner to improve now, but it's still improving at a slower rate than the G20 average. And this suggests that there's still a lot of potential for policies in this space. Now, if we look back over the available data, going back to the 1970s, and here we show energy productivity on the vertical axis and per capita income on the horizontal axis. The dot points are just 1 year of data for 2014, but if you think behind these curves is actually a cloud of data of similar dots going back to the early 1970s. And if we compare the GCC countries with a selection of OECD countries, we see that there's a different type of economic growth, a different structure of the economy as per capita income increases in many of the advanced OECD countries in the G20. We see that energy productivity is also increasing. They have decoupled economic growth from energy consumption. And so they're getting more value for every ton or MBTU, or a ton of oil or MBTU of gas consumed. In Gulf countries, blessed with great resource abundance, which has created very, very high GDP per capita, higher than the advanced OECD countries. However, it's a very, very energy-intensive, low energy productivity form of growth. Now, is this a problem? Well, we can think about this in terms of paradigms, the paradigm of growth that we're in. If oil prices remain high, resources remain abundant, we can continue to meet domestic consumption within the existing production. Growth paradigm 2 here of continued oil-based growth can continue to deliver higher income and quality of life for citizens. However, this has risks associated with it, which are well recognized. If there is either some sort of fall in energy prices or revenues from exports, and this decoupling of energy consumption and growth is not achieved, we run the risk of a period of moving into the transition zone 3, which is falling standards of living. Now, in the ideal world, should diversification plans be successful, energy efficiency be rolled out in the different sectors, we can imagine a world where Gulf countries move into what we could call a sustainable energy productivity growth paradigm. And this will be still different from what the OECD is doing, which is a much less energy intensive model of green growth. But still, it would put countries of the region onto a sort of a virtuous pathway where the amount of income created for every unit of energy consumed domestically increases with the prosperity in the country. So this is what we mean when we talk about transition to higher energy productivity growth. Now, if we put this in terms of what it might mean for carbon emissions, which is an important part of development strategies as reflected by each GCC country's NDC, submitted to the Paris Accord. And in Saudi Arabia's NDC, we have 2 basic pathways that were highlighted. One is an energy-intensive pathway which prioritizes energy-intensive industry. There's a lot more domestic energy consumption, which puts downwards pressure on the amount of production potentially available for export. an alternative pathway which prioritizes diversification into higher value manufacturing and services, strong investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy, would put the priority on using these domestic energy resources for export and using that income to channel into other higher value parts of the economy. And this can drive a lot of the structural changes that will deliver the CO2 emissions reductions that are imagined as part of the NDC process. What does this mean in practice when we look at the structure of industry? So there are two basic types of activities. The basic energy-intensive products and processes, like production of steel, cement, fertilizers, aluminium, basic petrochemicals, the things that the Gulf has been doing well, built on this competitive advantage in access to low-cost oil and gas. However, there are another group of industries which bring another layer of value creation, which most countries are also trying to enter into. Plastics for beverages, engineering and construction, specialty chemicals, moving into health, pharmaceuticals, building ICT industries, and some of these other areas. And what an energy productivity framework would suggest is that we need to build on the strengths of our economies by maintaining competitiveness in these basic energy-intensive products, particularly as domestic energy prices rise through energy efficiency, strengthen and build local supply chains to these downstream higher value-added industries, and develop markets domestically and abroad that can consume them. So this is the future of what this energy productive growth paradigm might look like from the industrial perspective, which drives a lot of the shift. So during this forum, we've been speaking a lot about the need for a more integrated energy policy. Often the energy efficiency community on one hand is working independently or even in competition with the renewable energy community. And this is not a way to maximize the benefits from an energy transition. Also, which doesn't often go included in the discussion, is conventional power supply, which remains the backbone of most economies and the development and the continued development of their energy systems. And so energy productivity is an idea which is flexible enough to integrate conventional energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency around this idea of maximizing the value environmentally, socially, economically from energy consumption. It can bring in lots of different policy agendas: industrial competitiveness, greenhouse gas avoidance, job creation. At the center of it is energy efficiency as the first fuel. This is an integrating idea, but it's one that has great potential, we see, for Gulf countries and like Saudi Arabia to implement as a way of organizing and coordinating activities within the energy policy ministries. So I'll conclude with a few questions, and these are really questions that I don't have the answers to, and with the body of expertise in the audience, I'm sure there is a good range of insight that we might perhaps explore in discussion. But these are some of the questions that sprung out of this work that we had. First of all, there's a lot of energy and activity and ambition going into 2030 plans across the GCC region. Most of them are focused on growth and diversification and the need to diversify risks from oil-dependent growth. But there's an opportunity to recast a lot of these strategies in a more climate or green narrative that could help engage with the international community to drive investment into these sectors. Investment means jobs. It doesn't need to be working against the traditional competitive advantage that the Gulf countries have had. So is there an opportunity? What's holding it back to reframe some of these transformation policies around a green agenda. Second question is that energy productivity or intensity is a well-used indicator around the world. China has used it to great advantage in organizing its energy policy, and I mentioned the US and Australia. European countries also use it. We see many indicators in the 2030 plans in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. Renewable energy targets, economic structural targets, employment targets. We don't see energy intensity or productivity targets yet. And this might be a space to watch, but it would be interesting to hear any reactions of people as to why this might be so. Another key issue which is on the agenda now that oil prices have risen is the degree to which this might diminish reform efforts to diversify the economy, and what sorts of domestic energy pricing models can lock in some of these reform efforts, rather than to what we've seen in the past is when energy prices have gone up, a lot of the impetus for diversification and reform have slowed down. So some attention needs to be paid to the depoliticization of setting prices and what sort of models might help that. One of the key industries, which is quite interesting from a carbon perspective as well, is petrochemicals, and how a great deal of value of the barrel is created by not burning it. In fact, maybe in 100 years, people will look back on this age and say, these people were crazy. They burnt this stuff in furnaces, and it is so valuable for many other uses in the petrochemical sector. It's also growing faster, petrochemical sector, than almost any other sector of energy demand. In 50 years, instead of 20% of oil consumption, oil being taken up by petrochemicals and 80% being used elsewhere, it could be the other way around. But how is the petrochemical sector positioning itself in the green energy transformation as a source of demand of non-combustible oil? So it's a relatively green use of oil. And what strategies are being pursued by industry and partnerships with government around that in their green transformation plans? So those are just a couple of the questions that occurred to us while we were working on this report. It's available online in Arabic and in English. There may be a few copies still left at the back of the room, but very much welcome any reactions either here or later. You can get in touch with Radia or myself. Our details are listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Howard. Now, the subject of energy productivity is getting very, very important worldwide. So I would like to ask Mr. Dawi about how does the Arab region rapidly growing domestic energy demand challenge its traditional energy policies?
Thank you very much, and I would like also to join you to thank Nicholas for presenting the joint report, which answered initially to the question where in the Arab region we say as a key message, business as usual is not anymore an option, which means that the current policies in place, including the one that we are implementing, it needs a careful review and redesign, even though this is not, I would say, a general message for all the Arab countries. Taken individually, we see certain proactive actions. But now, as I presented, the only region globally that started at the, I would say, the lowest rate in terms of the energy consumption, we don't consume as much when it comes to the total. But if you take it per capita, we see that over the last 2 decades, it's doubling the consumption, which means that the business that we implemented today, you see how many lights that we have here. The AC was so high during all the days when we were here and we get very cold. The transportation system infrastructure that we have. And with all of this, we comparing the intensity rates with which independently how it's, if we consider as objective or not, but looking from energy productivity point of view, we see that obviously that the domestic consumption is extremely high compared to the product that we have. It's just consumed for the residential sector, for an industry basically dependent on oil and gas, and not taking whole value or the added value that we can get from like the petrochemical sector and all the additional industry that we can have. So we're still very intensive in tertiary energy, and the same transportation sector. So there is three sectors making that our consumption is the highest compared to the global average, and even compared to each region. And with that, obviously within the Gulf region, it's the highest in terms of consumption. So it's really needs to look at the demand management in terms of really management in terms of looking the policies at the beginning, and then putting the policies that look at it in an integrated approach. I give just an example of United Arab Emirates that started doing a new strategy through a multi-stakeholder engagement, where they put a 40% target in terms of energy demand management over 2050. There's something, it's still under draft, but it's a real challenge, but they think through liberalizing the market, working with the utilities in terms of electricity, they can have value. But with that, obviously, the real challenge within the region that people forgot, we used to be a market for export. We are a market today domestically, and it's growing. And all the growth will be, it's yes in Asia, but by unit in our region. So we need to really review the business model that we have today.
Thank you very much. I would like to add a very important thing about Kuwait. The per capita consumption in 1971 or 72 used to be around 3,000 kilowatt hour per person, per capita. Today, the average, we're talking about 12 to 13,000 kilowatt hour per capita. So because of the change in life, how we conduct our daily business and the expansion, the number has increased. And I think the government has done an important step toward the restructuring of the tariff of electricity and water. And I think it has been implemented in late 2017. And I think it will have, we will be able to assess the impact of the restructuring of the water and electricity tariff, I think, by the end of 2018. Dr. Howard, I would like to ask you about how can government promote highest value economically, socially, and environmentally from the energy use?
Thank you for the question. And this is the key issue, and it's not as simple as just pressing the energy productivity button. You can't just set a target to say, we'll increase energy productivity by 20, 30, 40% by 2030 and expect things will change. There's a lot of capacity, institutional reform, skills and training of the local labor force, opportunities for education, innovation, new sectors. And this isn't an easy road to walk, particularly with a history of such great resource abundance, which has prioritized a particular type of growth and activities and way of life around that, with access to relatively low-cost energy. Now, the first step, and it's a hard step to take, is to reform energy prices. And I think this is something that most GCC countries are now well down the road of various implementation plans. Keeping momentum if revenues increase due to oil exports is going to be a challenge. But putting in place perhaps price bands or an administrative arrangements, a little perhaps like what's been done in Jordan, can serve as a model to lock in some of these institutional reforms on energy pricing. The other thing, and we can't emphasize this enough, and perhaps everyone here it's preaching to the converted, but energy efficiency really is the first fuel. If we look at the employment potential of where these benefits can come, as well as the economic benefits, it's much more integrated in with the infrastructure choices that are made, whether it's a steel plant, a new building, roads, public transport. This is all critical basic infrastructure for modernization. It's deeply integrated in with energy efficiency. So strengthening that through the energy efficiency training and accreditation programs that most countries now are doing is, to bring it really front stage. If I was to pick a second area after energy price reform, that would be it.
Yeah, I think we have like to especially indicate that Kuwait has started the energy efficiency program since late 1970s. So, and we are proud to have the first code, building code in Kuwait, established in 1983, the first country in the region. So I think Kuwait has really a good start on energy efficiency 4 decades ago. Dr. Saddawi, what progress is being made in the Arab region and beyond in setting energy production or intensity stages? And what are the key factors that should inform the setting of targets?
Maybe it's really good to hear also from the audience what they think about the work so far that was done for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Was the work intended actually to look at how we put targets, given that the Kingdom is part of the G20, and it will be very good to see that in the future. So basically the concept in itself is today, when we presented for energy efficiency compared to renewable energy, all the discussion went through renewable energy. We forgot the real hanging fruit. Some people told that is the hanging fruit. The others said that you have it here, so you just take it. It's like, someone we had, she's here in the room. She said, we have it in the floor, so you just take it. So basically, no one cares, I would say, given the difficulty in terms of looking real implementation of the policy in terms of energy efficiency. It's really difficult. It goes through different processes, but it cannot be just government institutions. We need the stakeholder engagement, specifically the private sector and the financial institutions, in order to make it happen. Plus, as you indicated, the energy policies that cross the different countries in the GCC, already a huge effort started, and I hope it will be maintained. But a certain energy productivity target, as per I would say, our assessment from the study conducted, it's, from our opinion, it will be the right way to do it, to set target in terms of energy productivity rather than talking about energy efficiency, because especially if you talk about oil and gas producing countries, because really this is the one that would help to put all the stakeholders engaged in the economy, working together, not necessarily the energy sector, all of them, in order to create value and create jobs. And this all through the economic diversification as well. But putting it as I would say, a target, it may also involve certain commitment from the countries, and this also is left to the policy makers, how they see putting this, because it's also include a component of also mitigation in terms of the element of climate change issues.
I think we are running behind, so I think I can give you 1 minute. If you would like to add, I think time is we are beyond. Okay, we can take one question from the audience, one or two. Any question from the audience? No questions? I can give you 1 minute if you would
like. So, like perhaps just in closing, we intended this report really as a start to the conversation around energy productivity. There are many dimensions that play out on energy productivity in the power sector, industry, petrochemicals, very important, in buildings and transport. And what we would like as part of this process of consultation and dissemination of the report is to hear whether this is a relevant way to look at sustainable development issues that is useful for governments in the Gulf, and the degree to which it can play a constructive role in building a bridge between the international sustainable development narratives and the local economic transformation goals, which are really deeply and well established, whether it's through Vision 2030 plans or shorter term economic transformation plans. And so we're keen to hear from people, and this can be useful for adapting future research on this or other issues.
Thank you.
I think for us, the work that was conducted gave very key messages that will be reported for the high-level political forum in New York, and as support for the Arab countries who will this year present the voluntary national review. Our objective as the UN Regional Commission is to support in terms of the implementation of the 2030 agenda. More importantly, is to ensure that what we produce through the different projects that we initiated with partner organizations, that we really make impacts not only at the policy level, but also at the technical and capacity building level, and the data information that we support the monitoring and tracking progress towards sustainable energy. So it would help, obviously, to correct the policies when needed and the strategies. And I think the work consultative report on the energy productivity could be expanded to the other GCC countries if suitable. So we would have, I would say, in the future, possibility to have energy productivity target not only for the Kingdom Saudi Arabia, but also hopefully for Kuwait. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank my speakers and panelists for their valuable presentations and their discussion. And we hope to be part of the fifth Arab Forum, inshallah. Thank you very much.
نشكر لكم المشاركة القيمة بهذه الجلسة، وليتفضل الوكيل المساعد لشبكات النقل وممثل راعي المنتدى المهندس جاسم النوري لتكريم المشاركين في هذه الجلسة. الدكتور أحمد الملا، الدكتور نيكولاس وارت، والآن حانت لحظة إطلاق تقرير التحليل الشامل لقطاع الطاقة للبلدان العربية وفقاً للخطط الوطنية للمساهمة في الحد من التغيير المناخي. اسمحوا لي أدعو مديرة إدارة الطاقة في جامعة الدول العربية السيدة جميلة مطر فلتتفضل مشكورة.
السلام عليكم جميعا واهلا وسهلا بكم مرة اخرى. الجلسة صغيرة ومخصصة لاطلاق التقرير الشامل حول الدول العربية ومساهماتها في الNDCs والINDCs. التقرير الشامل جهد مشترك بين 3 جهات. اسمحوا لي انتهز الفرصة واوجه لهم الشكر: المركز الإقليمي للطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة، والوكالة الألمانية للتعاون الدولي GIZ. التقرير موجود، ولكن عندنا شوية تعديلات على الإخراج حتى ياخذ شكل أجمل، وإن شاء الله نترجمه إلى اللغة العربية ويكون مطروح وموجود على الويب سايت سواء لركري أو للجامعة العربية أو لGIZ. كلمتين لكل جهة قامت بهذا الجهد، وبعدين السيدة رنا الجندي بتقدم برزنتيشن صغيرة ملخص حول التقرير. أدعو الدكتور أحمد بدر الزميل رئيس المكتب المدير التنفيذي للمركز الإقليمي للطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة بالقاهرة فليتفضل.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. احنا مش هناخد من حضراتكم دقيقة، مش أكتر من دقيقة أو حتى أقل من دقيقة، عشان بس نعلن إطلاق الريبورت زي ما قالت الباشمهندسة جميلة. احنا يعني أنا في أقل من دقيقة بالإنجلش كده عشان بس البارتنر معانا من GIZ. ف this is actually the most recent updated report about the NDCs and INDCs for the major part of the Arab countries. The report have been done in a collective effort with GIZ, the League of Arab States, and RICRI team. The most important valuable point of this report, in one sentence, then I will leave it to my colleague Rana to detail it, is actually that it shows that most of the countries using business as usual along renewable energy with regard to solar and wind. And actually for the adaptation, as always the case for GCF, there is no clear definition about what are the adaptation activities, which is another challenge. So if it highlights something, it highlights that the challenges that we all work together to highlight these kind of projects that need to be added to combat the climate change. I will stop here, thank you, and I'm calling my colleague, Ms. Anita Richter, to come and to give her high-level comments until Rana's come. Anita, please, floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, yeah. I'm very glad that we can launch this analysis of nationally determined contributions of the Arab countries today at the Arab Forum. And we as GIZ are supporting the work of the League of Arab States in the field of energy and also on climate protection already since a long time. So since 2013, we work with the Energy Department, and one of our goals of the current cooperation is to bring the discussion of energy, sustainable energy development, and climate protection closer together. Sometimes if you go on all these conferences, you have a little bit the impression that the climate and the energy people are different tribes and don't meet so often and don't speak the same language. And it's one of our objectives for the further cooperation to bring these communities of experts closer together, and to support this study is one of the first activities that we do in this regard, but we would like to further support into this direction. So let's say from the climate protection perspective, it's of course obvious that the energy sector is at the core of greenhouse gas reductions. So it's totally clear that you have to consider this in climate protection measures. Energy sector experts may not have the same view on the topic, and maybe you ask yourself, what is in for me as an energy person to look into this discussion on energy on climate protection. And I think it's important just to stress the benefits that you can take out of this of the climate negotiations and of all the developments that go on globally on this topic. And I think what is really important and what also the NDCs contribute to the discussion is that they provide really a long-term view on developments of energy sector, of the economy, and they look also on the topic from a cross-sectoral perspective. So it's not to look only on electricity, but it's really to look on the whole energy sector and its interlinkages. And it puts, of course, also a very strong focus on energy efficiency. So this is also one of the very interesting findings of the study, that energy efficiency is also, let's say, from the perspective of the countries, the most cost-efficient way to reduce emissions. So this is interesting, I think, also for the energy sector, and it highlights also the necessity to link between different sectors, as we have discussed already today, the link between electricity and mobility, for example. And another aspect is the aspect of green financing. For example, the conditions of finance, of availability of finance for energy investments might change due to the discussions on climate protection. Maybe you have heard the news that the insurance group Allianz just announced to phase out investments in coal until 2040. So this, of course, has a lot of impact on energy infrastructure finance. And therefore, it's really important to actively involve in this discussion, also from the energy perspective, and to actively share ideas and approaches. And I think this is also something that the international climate discussion and climate negotiations that they bring in. Is this aspect that globally there's a search for new approaches, for ideas, for concepts to build a more sustainable economy, a more climate-friendly economy. And I think everybody can benefit from that, and I hope that we can contribute a little bit to these goals and, as I said, bring these communities of energy and climate closer together. Thank you, and I would say the Rana from RICRI will now present some of the insights of the study.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you for the organizers, for the great hospitality. I just need the pointer for the presentation. I need the pointer for the presentation. Thank you very much. So to start with, I will be very brief for the presentation. Before starting with a brief summary of the findings of the study, I just wanted to say what's the difference between the INDCs, the NDCs, and what do we usually mean by nationally determined contributions. So all of you know the Conference of Parties, or the COP. In the 21st COP, which took place in Paris in 2015, 196 parties came together and they agreed on the International Climate Agreement under the UN Framework on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, where they agreed to try to hold the Earth's temperature beyond 2 degrees and to push their efforts to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees in the coming century. So the countries by then publicly announced the action that they will take to achieve these targets, and they called it intended nationally determined contributions. However, the word intended was used then because not all the countries have ratified the Paris Agreement, and because by then the Paris Agreement itself was not finalized. So once the country rectifies the Paris Agreement, it becomes a nationally determined contribution, and we dropped the word intended. How does the process work in general, and why do we need the NDCs and INDCs? It pairs the national policies with the global framework under the climate change, and it serves as a constructive feedback loop between the national policies and the international framework, and they are the primary means for governments to communicate internationally the steps that they will be taking to fight the climate change. Now going to the study itself, when we did the analysis, we wanted to study the 22 countries of the League of Arab States, and what we found that 20 countries out of the 22 have their INDCs or NDCs. Only Morocco and Palestine have NDCs since they rectified their Paris Agreement, and all of them already are available on the UNFCCC website. So the methodology of the work that we did, we first read the 20 NDCs and INDCs. We did a very big Excel sheet where we have all the actions related to the energy sector in all of the 20 INDCs. And then we had this constructive Excel sheet where we have all the actions in all the sections: mitigation, adaptation, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and also the sectors that have close relation with renewable energy or energy efficiency. And we identified the actions that are in each country. And I will go very in details. The methodology follows a conceptual tree shape where the NDC or INDC is the main trunk, and then the branches are the sectors: the mitigation, adaptation, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. And then the trees are the actions inside each and every sector. So we first start by general information regarding the business as usual that the countries have mentioned, regarding the base year and their timestamp till which time they intend to do these actions. And then we have a visualization of the mitigation action that they are planning to have, the targets, the costs, or where they are conditional or unconditional. And here we mean that they are conditional to the international support. If they receive international support, they will have it. If they don't receive it, it's unconditional, and they will do the actions anyways. For the adaptation, however, and since it's not related that much to the energy sector, it's related to the agriculture, water, tourism, or health, we focused on it but did not give it the more importance as the mitigation actions. After this, and since the energy sector is the main core of the study, we identified the renewable energy by technology. So we mentioned the wind, solar, and geothermal technologies, each country, which actions are they willing to take in these sectors. And for the energy efficiency, however, we divided them by sector, like household, buildings, and I will go into more details in the future. And then for the water desalination and the carbon capture and storage, we mentioned it only in the countries that have mentioned some actions which are related to renewable energy solutions. So to give you an overview, this is the data set overview for the mitigation and adaptation. And as you can see here, it starts with the base year. The legend means the green color means that they are mentioned with a specified target in their NDCs or INDCs. The olive green color means that they are not mentioned in the INDCs. The blue color means that they are mentioned, however, the target is not specified in their plans. The red color means that they are not mentioned at all. And in the countries here we can say that the countries which are in black are the countries that have the INDC, and the countries which are in blue are the countries that have NDCs. And this is the rationale for everything. Here you can see the dataset overview for the renewable energy and energy efficiency. Again, it's divided by sector. It starts with the target. It shows us that almost all of the countries have identified targets for renewable energy, but some of them did not specify the targets specifically, but they say they have targets. It says the expected reduction of CO2 emissions. Some of the countries were very specific and detailed in saying how exactly the amount of CO2 emission that will be reduced in the future by 2020 or 2030. Like Morocco and Tunisia, for example, they have very specific numbers. However, other countries did not mention at all or mentioned it very generally speaking. Also, we have mentioned the expected costs and then the actions by technology, and we did the same for the renewable energy. Going more into the details of the study, the general information, it shows us very briefly that almost all of the countries have a timestamp and a clear timeline for the mitigation adaptation actions. Only Somalia did not have any timestamp. However, we can see that almost all of the countries starts in 2020 till 2030, but Palestine further expanded the timeline and they will go till 2040. And some of the countries already started with their actions, like you can see here, like Djibouti, Morocco, Palestine, and Tunisia, they started early. Some of the countries only specified the target year without specifying the start year, like the Bahrain. And other countries, like the UAE, specified the base year and did not specify the target year. And the other table here shows us the base year for all the countries that only mentioned their base year. Now, for the main findings, if we speak about the mitigation, here is the avoided emission, their avoided emission target per country, the unconditional scenario and the conditional scenario. We can see here that almost all of the countries have good targets. It varies from 0% to 200% or to even less. Only Palestine have two scenarios in the conditional scenario, the independent scenario and the statu quo scenario. We did a more detailed analysis of the cost of the mitigation actions. We found that 71% of the mitigation costs are conditional to international support, and only 28 countries of the 20 in the study have costs for the mitigation. And we found the dependency on international support, it ranges between 45% and 100%. So some countries will not do anything unless they receive some international support. And even some countries went more into the details and they specified the renewable energy actions, their cost in the mitigation actions. So for instance, Morocco specified that 65% of the mitigation cost will go into the renewable energy directly. Now for the adaptation, it was not that detailed as the mitigation because it's not that related into the energy sector. However, most of the countries specified that it will cost less than the mitigation actions. And also most of the countries specified, like Tunisia and Morocco, they said that their cost will, the main reductions in the CO2 equivalent emission will come from the mitigation actions rather than the adaptation actions. Here is the table again. I will not go into the details, but the main sectors, the main technologies that were taken into consideration are solar, wind, hydro, biomass, geothermal, and waste. And here is the table. You can see the red. It's everywhere, but the green also is everywhere. So the same for the energy efficiency, but for the energy efficiency, the sectors that were taken into consideration are the household, electricity, transportation, policies, and industry. Now, for the energy efficiency, it's less costly than the renewable energy. And when we did the comparison between the cost for energy efficiency, we found out that almost it's less than the renewable energy sector by 80%. So it's more efficient and less costly. And most of the actions can prove this. For the last sectors that we have found some actions related to the energy sector, it's the water desalination and the carbon storage. We found that Yemen, Qatar, Djibouti, UAE, and Tunisia mentioned the water desalination using renewable energy solutions in their actions. and Bahrain, KSA, UAE, and Iraq have considered the carbon capture and storage in their plans. That's mainly it for the findings, and for the conclusions, we found that not only the financial burdens, it's what matter. However, the technology transfer and the capacity building are very important to be taken into consideration in the future plans and actions. The Green Climate Fund, the GCF, was mentioned in several action plans, and which means that the conditional support will mainly come from it. Some action plans, such as Tunisia, they mentioned the potential of job creation from renewable energy and energy efficiency. And to be exact, they mentioned that in the future they might create 58,000 jobs in the renewable energies, and hence this can be taken into consideration in the future plans. Also, some of the plans mentioned the local manufacturing, which should be taken into consideration in the future. And last but not least, we can say that these documents till now are only voluntary. However, they should become mandatory for all the countries, and all the countries should work together to set regional targets for the reduction of the CO2 emissions in the future to achieve better results in order to work together hand in hand with renewables and energy efficiency. And that's it. Thank you. Just one thing to say at the end, it's just the first edition, as Engineer Jamila said, and we are pleased to incorporate any of your comments or modifications. Thank you.
كل الشكر للقائمين على هذا التقرير المتكامل. وليتفضل الوكيل المساعد لشبكات النقل وممثل راعي المنتدى المهندس جاسم نوري السيدة رنا الجندي أخصائي أول بالمركز الإقليمي للطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة. والآن فليتفضل المهندس أشرف كريدي مدير التخطيط بالمركز الإقليمي للطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة لإدارة جلستنا السادسة، وهي بعنوان تأثير التنسيق الدولي والإقليمي على تلبية متطلبات التنمية المستدامة في المنطقة العربية.
مساء الخير جميعا. I know that it's the final session, and I'm just confused if you are looking to finish or not. Sorry. They're all right. Okay. Let's say good evening. At the end of this forum, we're going to tackle one of the most important topics. I hope it will be energized enough that to keep you holding with us till the end of the forum. But usually the cooperation and the integration are a topic that is always on the table, and it is always the topic behind the scene in all the conferences and the forums. So we saw that we may brought this topic on the floor, and we discussed what are the potential cooperation between different regions, especially what is related to our Arab region. Let me first welcome the speakers in our panel. First, please allow me to welcome Ms. Tessa Pestra. Tessa is our friend. Oh my God, now I noticed. No, she's Tessa, by the way. And she's not the director of the KIFAS. She's the official envoy of energy and water for the Middle East region from the government of Netherlands. Mr. Yan Tao is the senior manager of the Global Interconnection Corporation. This big initiative from China to interconnect the world with one grid. Mr. Omar Abu Eid, he is the director of Energy and Environment Climate Change Program in the European delegation to Jordan. Ms. Lucy Berger, she is the Economic and Trade Affairs head for the European delegation to the GCC region. And our friend Dr. Ahmed Al-Biltagi, he is the director of the energy transport sector in the European delegation to Cairo. So welcome all of you to the final panel of the forum. As far as Engineer Jamila informed me before I start this session, that I'm the only one representing the South somehow within this region, not by nationality, but by affiliation. So I will highlight a little bit about what types of coordination and cooperation is being held in the South to disseminate the renewable energy and energy efficiency, not only topics, but mentality during the Arab region. Actually, I think as regional partners, starting from the League of Arab States, our center, our colleagues in ESCWA, in the Arab Union of Electricity, we're all working together to drive the policies towards more sustainable policies. I remember when we started working 10 years ago, we were talking about hopes and dreams. Now we are talking about plans and implementation. We saw in the morning when we launched the FX numbers that speaking about achievements, numbers that shows that things have been done on the ground. Policies have been designed and established, implemented, and even evaluated. We are seeing the wheel is moving very fast. We are seeing the engagement at the very high level, at the ministerial level, and even at the presidency levels. What is missing till now is the, let's say, the effective tools for implementation. And this is what we need to look for in the future. This is what it is really needed to be transferred to the South, or between the South, is how to successfully implement and successfully learn the lessons of what has been happened in different regions while the implementation of the policies in the region. We all know about the stories of the feed-in tariff. And we all know that in most cases it won't work in the region. So we need to learn something like this. We need to learn how Egypt moved from the feed-in tariff to the auctioning or the bidding process. We have very good experiences worldwide, good ones and bad ones, and we need to learn from them. And this is the main purpose behind the integration and the cooperation. And we also very well know that working in individual bases is not the future. The future energy system is always an integrated system. And that's why we need always to be integrated and to be connected and to be aware of the requirement of each others in the South and in the North. Let me start with our first speaker. Tessa, we would like to hear about what is the orientation and the direction from the North, and especially from the Netherlands government towards the region in the field of sustainable energy. The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Do I press this or?
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming. Okay. So. Have a. So thank you very much, dear organizers. Ustaza Jamila Matar, thank you so much for this kind invitation, and Dr. Ahmed Badr, and all our other friends for inviting us here for this very important and timely meeting. I'm really impressed with what we've have been seeing and hearing about over the past 2 days, and indeed. We were dreaming a couple of years ago, and now we're really talking about action. So I'd like to tell a bit about what we are doing as the Netherlands in terms of support to the region we're in now, the Arab region. It's broader than energy alone. We're looking at sustainable development, of which energy obviously is a very important part. So let's talk about why we're doing this. We share a concern from, as we might say, the north about climate change. Obviously, we've seen a very successful COP21 in Paris, and we feel that as this area or this neighborhood is our neighboring. You are our neighbors, and we see that climate change is going to be very serious in this region, especially in the arid region of the North Africa and the Middle East. And we feel that we have a shared concern about this. As I said, we are neighbors, so obviously what happens here in this region will ultimately affect us as well. And we, as the Netherlands, we have much to offer in terms of efficiency and a holistic approach in water, food, and energy. Especially water and food. Obviously, the Netherlands has many centuries of economizing and becoming more efficient in its food production, using as little water as possible. For instance, I live in Jordan now, and we produce, in the Netherlands, we use 6 liters of water for 1 kilo of tomatoes, whereas in Jordan, this is 30 liters per kilo. And this, just simply such bare facts make it absolutely essential for a country such as Jordan, which is one of the top 4 water-scarce countries in the world, to become more efficient in its water use. The same goes for energy. We've really managed to reduce our energy use in our food production. These are some of the examples of what we're looking at when we're looking at sustainable development here in the region. So what we have to offer, we're looking at ways to work on efficient natural resource management here in the region in several countries. We're looking at addressing water scarcity, as I mentioned in Jordan, for instance. We're looking at water and energy efficient food production. We would like to do this through the introduction of technology. We're working on knowledge and expertise exchange, vocational training. We're looking at capacity building together with governments. So both working with private sector and with governments in helping in policy development, technology transfer, and capacity building. And also part of this is bilateral trade, obviously. Another thing that we're working on, especially here in this region, is access to finance. I've been stationed in Amman, Jordan, for almost 2 years now, and I've found that there's a big sense of urgency. There's a vibrant private sector, and the governments have a pretty clear picture of where they want to go, but there's very little access to finance from outside the region and sometimes from inside the region as well. So we're looking at, So what I would like to mention here is one of the examples of what we're thinking about. It's been mentioned a couple of times already that although climate change is something that's very much a part of the present and the future in the Arab region, there's very little access to climate finance for this region. So we've started a regional partnership with RICRI as the Dutch government, as a northern EU member state from the north, under the Union for the Mediterranean, and focusing on renewable energy and energy efficiency. Now, one of the main goals of this partnership is to establish a high-level policy dialogue to discuss the opportunities and the challenges of a sustainable energy transition here in the region, and to look at what we need to put in place to actually achieve such an energy transition. And we're actually building a consortium of partners to look at these challenges and to develop a pipeline of bankable projects for renewable energy and energy efficiency, and to see how we can prepare these projects to find a combination of investors and financiers, both from the development banks and from the private sector. So I will leave it at this, and any questions I'd be happy to answer later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tessa. I think it's very important for any cooperation channel to put the target. So the access to finance and building a partnership for more projects, which is bankable projects, is very accurate, and we need all together to focus on this point. Now we're going to more global approach. Already China connected all of us with products. Now we will be connected with electricity. So, Mr. Yan Tao, we will be pleased to hear about JEDCO initiative to connect the whole world in one grid.
Yes, a slide, please. No.
No, not this presentation.
Not this, yeah.
I will ask the other speakers to prepare 3 to 4 sentences that you can say before the presentation is launched usually. So. Maybe Mr. Yan, you can start with, with an introduction till the presentation is ready.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It's my great honor and privilege to speak here today, and many thanks to RICRI and also to organizers. And I'd like to share with you our idea of global energy interconnection and also the regional cooperation. First, I will introduce the concept of global energy interconnection and our organization. I think it will help you understand the concept of GEI. Actually, the global energy, the concept of GEI was triggered by the China's renewable development practice in the past 10 years. In the past decade, China's renewable energy developed very, very fast. You cannot imagine. And the wind power capacity and the solar power capacity grew by 100 times in the past 10 years and 5 years respectively, which is unimaginable. And so far, the installed capacity of hydro, wind, and solar energy in China stand at 340 gigawatts, 160 gigawatts, and 130 gigawatts respectively. The renewable energy resource has become the third largest energy resource in China. Just 10 years, a complete different, yeah. Very, very surprising. As we know, China is a very, very large country, and most of our renewable energy bases are located in the North China, West China, and Southwest China. So thousands of miles away from our load center in the east part of China and the south part of China. And also we know renewable energy are intermittent and volatile. To deal with this problem beginning from 2004, China began to construct a long-distance transmission line that is an ultra-high voltage transmission, UHV power grid. So far, we have finished the 21 transmission UHV power grid and still 4 projects under construction. The total length of UHV line is 35,000 kilometers with a trans-regional capacity of 150 gigawatts. Because world renewable energy resource, its location are very similar to that of China. On this basis and our China's practice, the Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed on UN's Sustainable Development Summit in 2015 that it proposed a discussion on building global energy interconnection to facilitate efforts to meet global energy demand with green and clean alternatives. In the 2017 One Belt and Road Summit, President Xi Jinping reiterated this proposal. Actually, the concept of GEI is very easy. GEI is a clean energy dominated electric centric modern energy system that is globally interconnected, jointly constructed, and mutually beneficial to all. It is also a platform, an important platform for large-scale renewable energy exploitation, transmission, and utilization. In simple words, GEI is a combination of smart grid plus UHV grids and clean energy. Time limit, I will leave this page. So in order to put forward the global energy interconnection, China launched a non-governmental organization that's a Global Energy Development and Cooperation Organization, the GIDCO. That's what I belong to. And so far there are 402 members coming from 61 countries. On 5 continents, covering a variety of industries, including energy, power, information, environmental protection, scientific research, consulting, finance, etc. That's our membership structure. I repeat. We have 13 overseas offices. I'm from North Africa and West Asia, office. GIDCO. I want to add more words. So far, GIDCO has signed many agreements with the leading international organizations and institutions, including UNDESA, UNESCAP, UNESCALA in Latin America, and the African Union, League of Arab States, GCCIA, and also British Royal Academy of Engineers, Columbia University, etc. We also have signed an agreement, MOU, with governments of Brazil, Chile, Egypt, and Ethiopia. Some agreements are listed in the achievements list of Belt and Road Forum in last year's summit. The content of this agreement mainly includes information and joint feasibility study and joint planning and capacity training program. Next, I will mainly focus on the cooperations and actions. Since our establishment, we have tried to push forward the cross-border interconnection projects, especially the cross-China bordering. And after in-depth research on energy and power development and grid interconnection in Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, it has come up with the interconnection plans for China, Myanmar, and Bangladesh interconnection, China, Korea, Japan interconnection, which has been widely acknowledged and supported by the leaders and energy department of related countries. Later, I will talk more about these two projects. That's the China, Myanmar, Bangladesh interconnection projects. Actually, the China, Myanmar interconnection, the two bilateral interconnection was proposed 10 years ago, but in a stagnant status. Why? Because the interconnection is too short, and the capacity is very, very small. It's 200 megawatts, so it's not economical and also very expensive. When GIDCO proposed the China, Myanmar, Bangladesh interconnection, the capacity, yes, was enlarged to 2,000 megawatts above. So the two governments, the Ministry of Myanmar and the Ministry of Bangladesh, highly appreciate our proposal. So far, this project has put into the list of Belt Road projects as a priority. Following is our latest research achievements. That's GES backbone network, non-horizontal and non-vertical grids, which will form the energy artery connecting 5 continents, thus realizing energy security, sustainable energy supply, and the optimal allocation of clean energy around the world. So among these backbones, Africa, Asia, and Europe interconnection is our priority because Middle East and North Africa has at least two advantages. That one is in the Middle East and in the North Africa, they are abundant of renewable energy, and also for the strategic position. So Middle East and North Africa not only can be a generation center for renewable energy, but also can be a transmission hub in the Asia, Africa, and Europe interconnection. Actually, last year on November the 1st, 2017, UN DESA and GIDCO hold a joint high-level symposium in United Nations headquarters. GIDCO released our action for promoting Agenda 2013. 10 action and 5 mechanisms are proposed to advance 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sent us a message for GIDCO's 2018 international conference. He stressed that a global energy interconnection initiative provides a key to solutions that can efficiently use rich and renewable resources, such as wind, solar, and tidal, and to deliver a more than energy service to all, even at a long distance. So for time limited, I will leave my email, and any interesting to this, just send me email. I will show the full reports of the latest research. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Yantao, for this interesting approach. I would like to highlight on the issue that JITCO has now 7 offices worldwide, and for our region, they have their regional office in Cairo. So it's a serious approach, similar to other dreams that comes true. We wanted to know more about the 10 years network development plan of the European Union that could be connected to this network. So Lucy, would you please give us an insight about the EU policies and the EU GCC cooperation?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation of this forum, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm particularly excited to be here in Kuwait because I find it as an excellent idea that the Arab Cooperation on Sustainable Development and Clean Energy Forum is taking place also in the GCC region for one reason. Before I moved to Riyadh, I actually worked on climate change negotiations, and I was responsible for North Africa and Middle East. And for 3 years, we were always discussing how the challenges and the opportunities related to climate change, namely the water scarcity, energy challenges, are shared across the region because of the climatic conditions. So it is actually a great opportunity for the forum to come to the GCC and actually match the people and introduce the projects that are taking place in other parts of the Arab region and see whether there is interest to actually develop these projects jointly further. But I'm going to talk about the EU sustainable development policies and cooperation here today. Let me start by a few very generic insights. As you probably know, the EU is the largest development donor. In 2017, our development cooperation aid actually accounted for 75.5 billion euros. To give a little bit of background on the sustainable development, of course, I think you've heard many times today about the sustainable development goals, which followed up on the Millennium Development Goals. What I wanted to point at today here is that what changed between the MDGs, the Millennium Goals, and the SDGs was a greater focus on means of implementation, the governance, and institutional framework. And I think that these are actually really the elements that come back to the international cooperation. And this is actually why we are here in this panel and what we are trying to focus on. Also, what's interesting and what was new is that SDGs apply to all countries at all levels of development according to their capacities and circumstances. Out of 17 goals, actually 5 are directly energy related, which shows how important actually energy is and what a big challenge it is in terms of sustainable development. When it comes to EU Sustainable Development Strategy, it is actually our strategy to ensure prosperity, environmental protection, and social cohesion. This includes our climate action policy and clean energy, sustainable transport, of course, because starting with public transport networks, and I think we see a lot of projects now in the GCC as well that are developing. Sustainable consumption and production, which includes not only energy resources, but all other resources, as well as water, and conservation and management of natural resources. Something about the EU climate action. You probably have heard about the EU 2020 strategy, which actually is our strategy to deliver on the Kyoto Protocol, and it includes targets for 20% of renewable energy, 20% of energy efficiency increase, and 20% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, hence the name. Everything to be delivered by 2020. We prepare a annual review of where we stand in terms of implementation of our targets, and essentially we are well on the way for 2020. Already in 2014, we adopted our 2030 climate and energy framework, which includes the targets for our implementation of the Paris Agreement. We set for ourselves new targets: 40% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, 27% renewable energy in our energy mix, and 27% improvement in energy efficiency. The way we work in the European Union is that we translate these targets into national indicative or binding targets, depending on which targets we're talking about. And of course, investments form an essential part of their implementation. One of the most important elements in terms of investment policy is actually our current investment plan for Europe, under which we launched the European Fund for Strategic Investment. This fund actually allows us to promote projects of strategic importance in the European Union, in all regions of the European Union, which basically we have tools to either match projects and investors on a dedicated website, and at the same time we have support tools. For example, we're providing risk guarantees for those selected projects, so that actually the risk is taken from the investors and it's actually absorbed by the European Union. This investment plan has actually materialized in an essential number of projects in the European Union, from clean energy projects to also, for example, sustainable transport and infrastructure development projects. But of course, climate action is an integral part of the EU's foreign policy agenda, and as I already said, it's actually the international cooperation that is the most important part of climate action for it to be successful. I think what is worth noting is that climate change policy requires commitment, and the EU has been committed to climate action for quite a while. It has been one of our key policies for decades, and this commitment has actually materialized in actual economic benefits. Climate action policies create jobs. It also materializes in terms of innovation. Maybe at the beginning the commitment was required, but then eventually it has become economically viable to invest in climate-related projects. A few words. Oh, sorry, I forgot to. I didn't realize I wasn't changing the slides. I'm very sorry about that.
Actually, we thought we don't have a presentation.
Let me find the slide where I'm now. Yes. The EU energy policy. I'm finally getting to the energy part, so at least you get to see the slide. The EU energy policy, of course, includes the creation of energy union. European Union is all about integration, so of course energy being one of the most important challenges and policies nowadays requires us to also be better harmonized and integrated. The energy union's main objective is to make energy more secure, affordable, and sustainable. one of the key elements is actually to facilitate cross-border energy supply. Hence, our internal market rules actually shall also apply to energy, and of course, security supply in all EU member states. This is based on principles such as solidarity, which is one of the most important principles in the European Union, internal market rules, and of course, other pillars are energy efficiency, decarbonizing, and innovation and competition support. I already mentioned the 2020 and 2030 strategy. We, of course, also have a 2050 roadmap, which then aims for further decarbonization. I put this under both climate change and energy because this is to illustrate that actually climate action without energy doesn't make sense. We also have the Clean Energy for All EU Citizens policy, which basically aims to attract global investment of over 300 billion euros. In 2015, we attracted over 300 billion euros investment in clean energy, and it aims to support clean energy as this is the growth sector of our future. Just to highlight how the benefits actually come from clean energy policy by mobilizing of up to 177 billion euros of public and private investments per year. We actually can generate up to additional 1% in GDP and 900,000 jobs, which I think is quite important policy also in the Arab region. Now I'm finally at the regional cooperation. First of all, I wanted to actually speak about the Union for the Mediterranean, even though I'm currently based in the GCC. From my previous assignment, I know this policy quite well, and I think it's actually quite important to give this framework for my colleagues from the bilateral delegations to then be able to develop on the bilateral cooperation. I'm sure that all of you know, maybe even more than I do, about the solar energy cooperation that we have between the European Union and the Mediterranean countries. The Mediterranean Solar Plan has actually materialized in several quite ambitious projects in the Mediterranean region, and I think it has been a good catalyst for renewable energy development in the region. What I wanted to mention, which I believe maybe is not so well known in this setup, is the Union for the Mediterranean Climate Change Expert Group. And it's a cooperation on climate-related policies and projects, which was established not so long ago, in 2013. We cooperated with the Union for the Mediterranean Secretariat and decided that regular discussions about our climate change policies and all the sectoral policies under climate action actually make a great sense because we can better structure the way that we cooperate together on climate action, but also on energy, on water, on deforestation, all the important topics related to climate change. Its main objective was to develop joint projects and to match projects between investors, donors, and also bring the right technology. We discussed NAMAs back then, before the INDCs and NDCs were established, and we tried to find a way how to finance these ambitious climate-relevant projects. Most recently, the Union for the Mediterranean Climate Change Expert Group actually started focusing on finance. Finance has always been the most critical part of developing projects related to climate change, but even energy. And it's sometimes really funny because you do find projects which actually are commercial, They really can actually sustain themselves, but you sometimes need just a little bit to actually start the project before the economic benefits come in. And so the question of finance is very important. The Union for the Mediterranean Climate Change Expert Group, and in particular the Secretariat, actually started a study on climate finance, which they then introduced at the Conference of Parties in Bonn last December. And currently they are establishing a UFM Regional Climate Finance Committee. So for those who are actually not aware of this cooperation, I think energy projects can actually approach either Union for the Mediterranean Secretariat or your climate change teams in your respective countries and can look into the question of finance, where the finance could come from. Because we're not talking only about the EU funding, we're talking about cooperation also with OECD, with the Green Climate Fund, with the Global Environmental Fund, as well as World Bank.
1 minute, Lucy, please.
Yes, I'm almost done. 2 more slides. Since I am currently responsible for the GCC, I think it's also worth noting what we do with the Gulf. From the climate change point of view, we established a dialogue on economic diversification in the context of climate change, because economic diversification, of course, is the main pillar for climate action in the Gulf region. We've been talking about innovation, private sector development, clean energy, as well as interconnections. And we have a project which is called the EU GCC Clean Energy Network. It's a region-to-region cooperation project which created a network of clean energy interested stakeholders or companies active in clean energy across the 2 regions. The network has been active since 2010, so it has really collected a large number of stakeholders throughout its activities. We organize workshops, trainings, we share best practices, we share the newest information about newest technologies from different aspects of clean energy, including energy efficiency, including renewables, but also, for example, clean gas or interconnectivity within the GCC. One of the main elements that we have been focusing on for the last year is energy efficiency. We held trainings on energy efficiency standards in Kuwait in October 2017. We also held 2 energy efficiency trainings in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah and in Medina this year. And finally, I wanted to say something about research cooperation. Of course, development of clean energy doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it certainly doesn't happen without research. We have in the European Union the Horizon 2020 framework program, which is the largest research and innovation program globally. It actually accounts for 80 billion euro for 7 years. It started in 2014 and it finishes in 2020. We do not stop supporting research in 2020, but we will have a new framework program starting after that, and we're actually currently working already on the new priorities. But for the remaining 3 years of the work program, what is really interesting for the participants here is that there will be, for example, a call for projects for combining solar thermal electricity and desalination with a specific focus on the GCC. You might be disappointed that it's only GCC we're focusing on, but that actually doesn't say that you cannot cooperate across the whole Arab region. On the contrary, I would like to encourage it, and I'm coming back to what I said at the beginning. I think that there is a great opportunity in this project to bring together research centers and universities across the Arab world to look into a problem which is actually one of the greatest challenges in this region. Having GCC universities will probably be plus points for the project proposals, but of course it is not a requirement. And then there are other priorities that include, for example, circular economy, where there will be calls for projects for almost €1 billion between this year and 2020, or some other specifically targeting climate action and energy. So thank you very much for your patience, and if you have any additional questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for shedding the light on some very important financing initiative around the EU. I would like also to invite all the attendees to go to the EU website and to read the EU Strategy 2050, because it's all about decarbonization. This is very important for our economic future. And this is what the world is thinking about in the future. But to help us to do that, we need to shed the light also on a specific cooperation between EU and Jordan. So Omar, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, dear Ashraf. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, allow me to thank our dearest host, Dowlat al-Kuwait, and the Ministry of Electricity and Water for their kind hosting of this event. My dear colleagues at the League of Arab States, المهندسة Jamila and her team. My dear brothers at RICRI, Dr. Ahmed Badr and the lovely team, for having us today with them, and the colleagues at ESCWA as well for having this event all together. It's nice to be here, and I'm happy that my colleague Lucy started with shedding light on the EU policies at large. I will complement that as Mr. Ashraf reflected, that we will have an example on how we translate our policy into development cooperation. Waiting for the exercise. I think it's me now. Yeah. So I'm also happy to join you today, but equally important, my colleagues from Jordan, Engineer Yaqub Marar from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Engineer Emil Al-Asi, who's our team leader for the technical assistance. And actually, this is one simple example on how we reflect our cooperation and policy cooperation with our partners. We basically have more work together and more joint activities together, and we translate that into action. So although the EU is a worldwide donor, with our partner countries, we all work as partners, and we work together to develop such important policies. So I would start at least shedding light on where Jordan starts. I think most of us know that it's among the countries that is poor in energy. We have a famous figure having 96% of imports for energy in Jordan, but for sure there are opportunities. The main current strategy is to diversify local sources of energy. There is a big high saving potential, and today and yesterday many colleagues reflected the need to work more on energy efficiency, which we all believe that it is the first option. It's a country rich in renewable energy. My colleague from China just reflected that as a potential for solar development within the world. And there is a political will, and it is shown by the latest development where Jordan ranked second and third in developing the green energy file. On the other side, and complementing what Lucy mentioned, we basically have a clear message within the EU. We only have one planet altogether, so we really need to protect that, sustain it as much as possible, and green energy is among the main tools to do so. And with that said, just quickly, I will not repeat what Lucy mentioned. I will just take the energy union strategy, which has big potential to be reflected in our partnership. We focus on integrated energy market, energy efficiency for sure, and definitely, as Ashraf mentioned, decarbonize the economy. There are lots of common targets between Jordan and the EU. Lucy also reflected the famous 20-20-20 target by the year 2020, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and also CO2 emission reduction. In Jordan, it's 10% renewable energy, 20% energy efficiency, and as my colleague from RICRI mentioned, between 1.5 to 12.5% through the NDC to have the CO2 emission reduction. But the aim in Jordan is around 4% only by the year 2020. Having said so, the EU has been having a long relation and partnership with Jordan, but no doubt there has been a clear shift back in 2006. We started with the declaration of cooperation through a Euromed ministerial that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, and there were clear areas of cooperation. The first was green energy, so Jordan and Europe will work more on green energy. There was one on maintaining Jordan within the Euromed networks, and whether that's virtual or real, as Lucy reflected the potential of having more cooperation between Europe and the region that doesn't stop only by political borders. And also Jordan started within their strategy the nuclear part, so we are helping them on nuclear safety and security because the EU policy is clear. There is no reflection on nuclear generation rather than enhancing nuclear safety and security, even in countries that do not necessarily have electricity generated by nuclear power, but it's very important to maintain safety and security. Now moving to our existing programs, we have a famous norm program, renewable energy and energy efficiency. We currently have two main programs. The first was RE1 with 40 million euro support, which is about to be concluded this year. We started a second program in 2016, which is RE2 with around 90 million. The main thing here is that we follow the national strategy for Jordan, so we help them achieve their targets. So we have a set of modalities within each program: sector budget support, complementary actions, pilot projects, technical assistance with engineer Emil and his team, and other activities which really enhance the development of the sector, both for the legal and regulatory framework, but equally important on the technical part with the national targets. So as you see, we have a time frame. We started in 2012. We aim to go towards 2019, so very close from this year. And we had quite a big shift. Before 2010, we had no programs with Jordan on the bilateral level, while now we have more than 163 million euros in bilateral cooperation on green energy mostly. We also have some other partners other than the ministry and the public sector, like the National Energy Research Center, NERC, whom is known for many of us here. We worked also with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is now the part of the Energy Regulatory Commission. We had introduced special programs with universities on introducing master's programs on green energy. We also work with vocational training centers whom are enhancing vocational training at large on developing renewable energy curricula within the country. And we had the first project on wind energy and concentrating solar power to bring in the needed capacity into Jordan in this field, as well as testing facilities that are up and running and were the first initiatives before Jordan started developing its renewable energy projects. On top, the famous NEPCO company that is responsible for the main grid in Jordan, we also work to enhance their capacity on having more integration of green energy into the national grid. Now, as we said, there is big potential, 20% energy efficiency, 10% renewable energy. We started with our technical assistance for RE. We also went through pilot projects. We're working on codes and standards, and we launched awareness campaigns. That is collectively part of the process to complement the legal and regulatory framework and technical development that the country is doing. Going to the pilot projects to give you some ideas, we started on the housing and schools scheme, where we introduced renewable energy and energy efficiency programs. equally important within host communities. Jordan is a main country that hosts refugees. So we have host communities that are in need of further development for both the national purpose as well as hosting such refugees. So we introduced renewable energy actions as well as energy efficiency into the schools and houses there. We did work on education and higher education. So we had 2 different programs. 18 schools in poor communities were equipped with green energy, both renewables and energy efficiency, as well as introduced a biogas project with the German Jordan University, and we'll be happy to launch the facility next Sunday in the Jordan Valley, which will be the first actually among the region to have such reflection of organic waste into renewable energy. Also, we worked with worship houses, which is a main area to introduce awareness, but equally important, a showcase for applications of renewable energy and energy efficiency. Working on the health sector as well, both public hospitals and private hospitals. In fact, the private hospitals had the first wheeling project in the health sector with solar power that was inaugurated last November. In the building sector, again, we worked with public buildings as well as with the Higher Council for Science and Technology, whom introduced the first geothermal facility for a public building. And again, on the nexus that was mentioned today and further confirmed by Tessa, we did have a very nice support to the Sahara Forest Project, which is simply using solar power to desalinate seawater of Aqaba and use it for food production. And this is a very important model that we are now enhancing to complement the Dead Sea famous project, and also to overcome the challenge of Jordan when it comes to energy scarcity as well as water scarcity. Now, quickly, I went through the 2 programs, RE1 and RE2. These are the main components. We have budget support and complementary support. But as I said, we started focusing more on the national targets. So we are really helping Jordan in developing its renewable energy national plan, as well as we help them develop the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan in line with the guidelines agreed with the League of Arab States. And this shows also further integration between the European Union and the actions of the League of Arab States. We are really keen to have more exchange between the fund, JREEF, that was mentioned today morning, NERC, to form a model on energy future agency. Again, NEPCO, the main electricity power company, to have a better vision for renewable energy integration beyond the year 2020, especially with the increased amount of renewables being integrated into the current grid. And also, we aim to have more solar water heaters applications, rooftop installations, and other facilities when it comes to street lighting and energy efficiency in buildings. Solar water pumps is also another reflection on climate change that is also being sought. We're introducing renewable energy to 5 main pumping stations and introducing a model on waste to energy. Now, if Ashraf allows me one more slide after this one, we're working to enhance the capacity grid, the capacity of the grid in Jordan to absorb more renewable energy together with EIB and AFD. And also, we have a special program on producing compost and biogas at a refugee camp so that we use the waste to energy model properly. Now, when it comes to regional support, complementing what Lucy mentioned, we try to combine the regional programs that the EU launches with the bilateral support. Currently, Jordan benefited from several programs, such as SUDEP, Sustainable Urban Energy Demonstration Projects, Cleaner Energy Saving Mediterranean Cities, SASMED, which mainly focus on introducing sustainable energy and climate action plans within municipalities and convert them into investment opportunities, and also reduce CO2 emissions for sure. Also, the issue of SwitchMed. Today we were talking also about mindset change when it comes to energy efficiency applications. SwitchMed is a program talking about sustainable consumption and production, and it tackles energy as well as resources. So it's really an entry point in such field. Other areas will be reflected also by Dr. Ahmed, my colleague. But in general, we have a mix of regional and bilateral support within our partner countries, and we try really to enhance the green development. And for sure, as mentioned today, seeking work opportunities and job opportunities, and sustaining the resources that are very harsh in a country like Jordan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omar, for this comprehensive presentation. Actually, Jordan is very spoiled by the EU, so a huge amount of support. Ahmed, you were worried about your last presentation. I think you are lucky.
You are lucky.
So, yes, would you please tell us more about the EU support to Egypt? No, but the presentation will be ready. Yeah, it's improving.
So, thank you very much. I would like, first of all, also to thank the government of Kuwait, the Decree, Dr. Ahmed Badr, Engineer Jamila Mata from the League of Arab States, GIZ, and all the organizers for hosting us here today. I'm going to present a different or a complementary model of cooperation. So, the cooperation with Egypt. So basically, I will try very quickly to shed light on the existing and ongoing track of achievements, let's say. 2017 for us, which was a year which was very important because it entailed a large and a very high and intense policy dialogue between EU and Egypt, which led to concrete results. And then afterwards, the way forward. The way forward could be also duplicated, not only is fine for Egypt, but it could be also duplicated for other countries as well. So my intention with this slide is not to discuss the challenges, but to say that actually in a given country, the challenges are important when you deal with energy. And in order to be able to tackle the problem and to support a partner country, you need to understand the problem. And you have to have a very high political and technical support from the beneficiaries. And this is actually what we are having in Egypt. We are having very high support from the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy. We are having the adequate support from the Ministry of Petroleum, and at the very highest level. For instance, if you're talking about security of supply, you have, of course, your partner country understands that this security of supply is strategic for the country, is part of its national security, but security of demand as well is part of the national security. So in order to integrate